Okay, guys. I was going to have a debate with somebody. It looks like he is not available today. Um, might come on a different time. Um, Let me see if I can. I'm just gonna try to get him to watch right now. Uh, just bear with me while we. I mean, this is gonna be another one of those hours where people. I mean, first of all, I think that this guy really would debate me, but I don't know when. And these people, they'll usually. Hold on, I'm gonna have to silence this screen. Mute tab. This guy's not gonna be happy. Okay. So this guy is not going to join today. Maybe a different time. So this might actually be a diss video. A good debater in some respects. Let me see what it shows up as on the screen. Yeah, good. Okay, because I changed the title. That way he doesn't have his original. His name was originally in the title, and I don't want to scare him off. But the subject today is Cuckservatives, and what I like to call, well, a lot of people call them Cuckservatives. I'm just going to call them the uh, white bread GOP, the white bread toast GOP. And white bread, I don't have anything to do with race. It has to do with attitude. Um, Attitude as in plain and very non-aggressive, very passive conservatism. And it was sparked by this comment I made on somebody's page. He put a John Kasich photo on his office wall. And I just had to laugh, and I did troll him. And this was going to be a Troll Tribune debate, but it's not now. By the way, if you're watching, my friend, you can chime in on the chat. There's a chat window right next door. But you kind of had a chance to really make your voice heard, and I don't think that it's gonna be as convincing now, because there's virtually no case for John Kasich if you really look at it rationally. John Kasich or Paul Ryan or any of these GOP mainstreamers. I listen to them once in a while because I have to drive in the morning, and lately they've become so stupid that I'll just put on mix music, like KC and the Sunshine Band, or I'll put on like the most generic music stream that there is. But hear me out. The reason that moderate conservatives are a failure is because they are the reason that this country is in the state that it is right now. I think I just got a message from this guy. Nope. I gotta silence all these screens, silence my phone. Look, the conservatives and the Democrats, or I should say the GOP, because the GOP has been unfaithful to the real principles of fiscal conservative for decades. They've betrayed it over and over and over again. There have been a couple presidents that have made stabs at getting spending under control. Ronald Reagan couldn't go nearly far enough because he had a Democratic House and Senate while he was president. And you had during the 90s, I think, if you really want to be honest, and this is something that I'm going to say, it doesn't make me feel happy to say it, but the most successful conservative politician of the past 80 or so years is Newt Gingrich. If you're talking about accomplishments, Newt Gingrich in the 90s was able to, as Speaker of the House, get a lot of budget cuts, a lot of programs slashed, and he was the reason. Bill Clinton, believe it or not, would not have had a balanced budget without Newt Gingrich and his insane cuts, which, I mean, some of them I think are fine, but you know, I think a few of them went a little overboard, even for me, in terms of how fast they were done, and how many people were actually affected by them. But the subject today is John Kasich, and I'm, as you know, I mean, despite the gear, I live in Ohio. John Kasich is my governor, and I'll explain to you why John Kasich is considered a success here, and why it's not a real measure of success, in my opinion. There you go. Let me just see if he's watching. So John Kasich was elected in 2010, and he's one of these politicians that owes his career as a Republican to Barack Obama. Barack Obama's, his healthcare policy and a lot of the other issues that he ran on here. Yes, he did win Ohio twice in the presidential election. Ohio kind of suffers from this dual identity where people will vote for Obama directly, but they'll show their real feelings during the midterm elections when he's not actually on the ballot. And that's very obvious when you just look at the electoral map in Ohio on years that he was on the ballot and years that he wasn't. Um, in 2008, he actually really did destroy John McCain here. And then 2 years later, with all the Obamacare crap and the rise of the Tea Party, Kasich came to power. First of all, Ohioans found it much more easy to lay the blame for this. I think the state lost 250,000 jobs between 2006 and 2010. Now that's of course that's the period of the great economic downturn. Um, that was under Governor Ted Strickland. And Strickland was a horrible governor. He's the last Democratic governor here since I think the early 80s. That was the last time there was a different Democratic governor. Ohio has been completely Republican since then. So it's almost as if Kasich didn't have to do much to win. There were other, by the way, there was a horrible Republican governor before Strickland. There was Bob Taft. The guy was an incompetent moron. And if you look at the history of this state, in terms of who's in charge, you'll see that the Republicans and the Democrats I mean, you've basically got a very moderate Republican Party that they're spending friendly, and they're facing off against kind of an old style labor friendly Democratic Party. Um, that's who Strickland was. Strickland was from coal country. Strickland was from southeastern Ohio, and he ran for re-election in 2010, and he got destroyed. Um, I could actually pull up the electoral maps if you give me a second. I'm going to share the screen in a second. Hold on. See if I can. Yeah, this was 2010, and yeah, he beat Strickland, not by much, by the way, and you know, he really got lucky. John Kasich ran in years that Barack Obama was not on the ballot. If he would have run in 2012, I'm positive that he would have not won, and that we would have been running with Democratic governors. They love Obama here in Ohio. A lot of people or at least in many of the urban areas. I mean, you could see 2006, that was before Obama ran for president. That was a complete collapse. It has nothing to do with race, by the way. The Republican that year was Blackwell. Um, so right now we're talking electoral maps, but I'll get to his principles next. So in 2014, and I actually went in depth on this in a little video that I did a couple days ago, but I don't know if I'm even gonna publish it because it's kind of a hassle to edit. But John Kasich benefited from a lot of favorable conditions. And why do I say that? The state of Ohio's Democratic base has eroded so badly since Barack Obama became president that I have doubts that there will be a Democrat elected statewide in the next decade. I don't know when they're going to recover. They don't have any young stars except for Nina Turner, who's so far left that people are trying to get her to leave the Democratic Party and join the Greens. Um, and why is it that they've been such a failure in Ohio? Well, um, you have to remember that we had machine politics here for a long, long, long time. There was in Cuyahoga County, for example, the largest county in terms of population in Ohio. There was a crazy corruption scandal right around the time that John Kasich was elected. Probably half of the elected officials in the county government went to prison. All of them Democrats. Just look up Jimmy DeMora, and I think the other guy's name was Frank Russo. Those were guys that it was basically old style mafia politics. I mean, I don't think it was really the mafia, but the tactics were very similar. I mean, they would essentially just take favors from contractors and sell off government business, and it went on for years and years and years, and finally the FBI stepped in and convicted DeMora and Russo of of racketeering and corruption charges. Hey, Dean Kruger, I saw you earlier on the Anthony Logan broadcast. Thanks for joining me. If you joined late, there was supposed to be a debate today. I don't think that the guy can join. We'll try a different day. Instead, I'm just going to rant about moderate conservatism. Moderate conservatism is a failure in America. There is no such thing. And I'll tell you what, I'm not being mean to just them. Libertarianism is falling apart. I saw earlier today the head of the Libertarian Party is basically throwing white nationalists out of the Libertarian Party. Now, I'm not trying to say that I like white nationalism, but it's very ironic that a party that prides itself on freedom of expression and civil liberties will throw out people based on opinions. That's not really in the spirit of libertarianism, and it's a painful process for a lot of people that believe in libertarianism. I believe in a lot of the principles of libertarianism. I don't consider myself the holder of just one ideology, but I think it's a horrible thing that's happened to that party. It's all because of Gary Johnson and his his social justice friendly idiocy of last election. Gary Johnson is the expression of what he's to libertarianism what John Kasich is to conservatism. You have somebody who's inoffensive enough and just too much of a nice guy that people are like, yeah, I could probably, and this is how they say it. They're like, yeah, I could probably vote for that guy. Now, why is it that they don't succeed on the national level? The reason is that these people, first of all, it is a character issue. One of the reasons that Donald Trump won in 2016 was because he was a risk taker, a very huge risk taker on a lot of these issues. There were plenty of conservatives, so-called conservatives like Scott Walker, that had very great. Scott Walker is a great candidate. If this guy would have said Scott Walker is a better president than Donald Trump, I think he would have had a case, because Scott Walker had a lot of successful policies. He pushed through some unpopular positions that were, in the end, helped his state very much. Yeah, Scott Walker, for example, fantastic governor, had no chance of beating Donald Trump. Would have, if he would have won the nomination, Hillary Clinton would have probably won the presidency. And there's a very simple reason why. Yeah, Walker is a competent governor, but yeah, on immigration, he did not make any strong positions. And I'm speaking as somebody who didn't do it myself. I wasn't a very hardcore immigration campaigner or immigration. I wasn't vocal about that topic. That was one of the topics that people were incredibly galvanized by in the Trump campaign. I missed it completely. A lot of these people, and that's why they're being called Cuckservatives. What do they do? You know, and John Kasich is an excellent example of them. They try to play the role of being, you know, in the middle, the acceptable candidate. They would say, no, Donald Trump's comments on Mexicans are reprehensible. This is unbecoming of a presidential candidate. They would say, we cannot have talk like this. Well, what he was basically saying was that the immigration system is broken, that we cannot have criminals flowing into the country, bringing narcotics and people smuggling, and by the way, weapons smuggling too. If people are so concerned about gun control, if Democrats are so concerned about gun control, why is it that if people can bring drugs across the border, they can't bring firearms? Yes, I think that Donald Trump won the election last year because he was. I mean, if you don't think he's a smart person, you should probably concede that he was actually smarter than a lot of these so-called conservatives. These are so-called conservatives. John Kasich is never going to actually have any accomplishments to his name. And let me tell you about his tenure here as governor. I said before, he benefited from a very, very favorable landscape. When President Obama was not on the ballot in Ohio and during his tenure, I mean, during the midterm elections, the Democratic Party has been an atrocious, just clusterfuck. They've accomplished. They in the year he was elected, it wasn't just about John Kasich. They lost every single other seat. They lost the Senate seat too. That has nothing to do with John Kasich. They lost, I think, what was the guy's name before? It wasn't John Glenn's seat. I think it was George Voinovich's seat, or somebody. Yeah, they lost a Senate seat the same year that John Kasich came to office, and that was it. And in 2012, what happened to that momentum? It evaporated because Barack Obama was on the ballot. People in Ohio were willing to vote for Obama, but on the years that he was not on the ballot, they voted against him. Why they do that, it's anybody's guess. I know people that today are extremely anti-Obama. They voted for him twice. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think many of them were caught up in the hope and change nonsense, and some of them probably won't go back. They've realized that they were taken for fools twice. But no, John Kasich won in 2014, for example. I'm going to show you that race again. You should see this person that he had to compete against. Well, let me share the screen, present to everyone. Yeah, this is Ed Fitzgerald. What do you think of that? Ed Fitzgerald was a train wreck of a candidate. He was the county commissioner in Cuyahoga County. He was a vain idiot. I think a lot of Democrats figured that nobody could win in 2014 against Kasich, who there was pretty much nothing for the Democrats to run on, because Kasich had expanded Medicaid. So that was their main goal. They wanted to expand Medicaid. Well, he did it for them. He caved on so many issues that there was no ideological backbone to John Kasich's time in the governor's mansion, which is going to end next year. He's term limited. John Kasich's basic position was this: he tried to pass right to work. That's the one policy that he did that truly was, a visionary one. It was in the end overturned by a ballot issue. The voters overturned it, and Ohio is no longer right to work. It is once again, or it never was right to work. It's again a closed shop union state. So he failed in that regard. I mean, he passed a law, and then he didn't campaign enough for it. He was a very weak supporter of his own initiative, and that's why the rest of his tenure is basically unimportant. So what other things did he do? He expanded Medicaid, and the other thing that he did that was important was that he removed a lot of the public funding from the state for public schools to local districts, and that's been unpopular here. I don't know that it's been a success. I think, for example, there's a couple of cities in my area that they basically fell apart in terms of education since then. So this person that I was arguing with, he said, well, the Medicaid expansion is good because you need to at least be able to hold on, I got a couple questions, but I'll address them later. A lot of these people were saying, you know, it's good that he expanded Medicaid. That means he has compassion for poor communities. Well, if he was taking away education money from poor communities, does that mean that they cancel out? It doesn't make any sense. The reason that John Kasich expanded Medicaid in Ohio is because the federal money is basically free anyway. So it doesn't hurt him. His budget can still be balanced pretty well, as long as he can manage that money appropriately. So they're getting money from the rest of the country to run a health insurance system, a poor people's health insurance system. And the Medicaid expansion, for those of you that don't understand, why is it the Medicaid expansion was a bad idea? And I'm not saying it because I'm against poor people getting help. I mean, I've had Medicaid. It's not like I'm judging people on whether they have Medicaid or not. I think some people do need it, and there's times when people need the at least in the state that our country is in over the past few decades. No, I don't think you can just get rid of Medicaid. I wish we could, but I don't think we can. But the problem with expanding Medicaid is this: that you have uncapped costs in that model. So therefore, the more people that you have on it, the larger of a budget you need dedicated to it. So the federal government has to pay those costs to the health provider, whatever hospital or clinic it is, and they actually pay a discount rate. Now, who makes up the balance of that discount? The money that the provider is not making by providing Medicaid services, which, by the way, not all of them do. So you're limited to just the hospitals and clinics that do provide it. Well, what they do is they'll just bill people that have regular insurance policies more, and that's the way that everybody else's healthcare bills go up, and that's the fallacy behind modern moderate conservatism, or neoconservatism is one of the things that a lot of people think that neoconservatism has more to do with just foreign policy, where a lot of these neoconservatives are for intervention in foreign countries. There's that Max Boot lunatic who still thinks that we should have invaded Iraq, and then we should have kept invading it. You know, that people think that that's neoconservatism. Yes, that is part of it. The other part of it is that these people are willing to do a lot of domestic spending. These are people. Neoconservatives are basically fiscally they're not very different. They're not very different from Democrats. Hold on, let me see this guy. Yeah, he says he's gonna watch tomorrow. I have a million things to do. Well, um, I don't know how somebody like can actually admire John Kasich. I mean, he's accomplished very little as governor of Ohio. Um, Now, what are the other reasons that? Oh my God. I'm just gonna tell him you are distracting me. I put you are distracting me with the funnies. You know, because I can't be too mean because then he's not going to want to debate. Uh, so gotta minimize that screen, man. Otherwise, I'm never going to get through this. So neoconservatism is basically these people, and Styx Hexenhammer, who a lot of you probably watch because he has just a gift for analyzing things and putting things in terms that are easy to digest and at the same time they're not too dumb and simplistic. Uh, he defines it well. A lot of people think that conservatism is somebody who will lower the corporate tax rate by 0.5% and increase military spending. That has nothing to do with conservatism. There's Democrats who will do that too. There's and that's such a it's such a low bar to shoot for. George Bush, FYI, a lot of his policies were very liberal. The No Child Left Behind. I mean, liberal and conservative. What the hell does that mean? When you have a federal government that just intervenes in cases like No Child Left Behind, that's a federal intervention in the education system. Um, that's not conservatism. Conservatism would be delegating more power and funding to localities. You would say, look, we're going to let people fend for themselves a little more, make their own way. You seem like a radical, LOL. I'm trying to bring people together, not divide us even more. Yeah, I hate the left, but when the right tries to act like Bernie Sanders. Let me see if he'll bite. Yeah, there's a real problem where people think that conservatism is just a simple approach in terms of some of these people. For example, they'll say, yeah, if you're against abortion, then you're a conservatism. That's possible, but or if you're for the war in Iraq. Charles Krauthammer, for example, is called a conservative. He's not. He's not a conservative. He's an interventionist. He has a number of conservative beliefs, but at the end of the process, you have to think about what does conservatism mean. It means that you want to bring the debt under control inflation. Um, I'm gonna tell him to let me know. Which alt? Right. This guy's kind of like, he's in and out. He's not even. I mean, he's asking me about the alt-right. What does the alt-right have to do with this? I'm not talking about. I mean, the alt-right has nothing to do with John Kasich. I know you guys must be just, blown away by this, but I've been trying to get this guy to come on. See here. Okay, so this guy's asking me. Okay. Yes. Let me send you the link. Hold on. So we might actually have a little bit of a debate here. Maybe not a formal debate. So in the meantime, before this guy comes on, so Dean Kruger asked a couple of questions. He said, "I thought you live in Texas, not Ohio." I've actually never been to Texas. I'm sorry to say that. I want to go to Texas. I do. I'm not a good traveler. I just don't get out of work very often. I probably should. I just have religious holidays that they wipe out all my vacation time. He also asked, does Ohio have a good candidate to replace John Kasich in 2018, or will it be more the sum? But I think he means the same. Yeah. I think they have a couple candidates that are they're decent. Hold on, I'm just telling him, I'm updating him, answering some audience questions in the meantime. Yeah, the gubernatorial candidates. There's a couple people. There's Mike DeWine, who's a senator, former senator. He's the guy that Sherrod Brown unseated in 2006, I believe. He's not bad. I don't think he's great. He's our attorney general right now. I think he's a little bit like John Kasich, but I've met him. Not much to say about him. There's another guy named John Husted. He would probably be a little more like John Kasich than Mike DeWine. And then you have to take another guy who I think is going to be the wild card. His name's Jim Renacci. He's a congressman from the Canton area. That guy is a lot more of the Donald Trump variety in terms of his opinions and way of expressing himself. Well, no, he's not. He's not that. I mean, he's more of a restrained politician than Donald Trump, but he's a Trump supporter. Jim Renacci's okay. And I say okay because I'm not trying to say that if you support Trump, that makes you a good candidate. I think you have to make a good bid for the issues, a good you have to make a good case on the issues. You can't just say, oh, I supported Jeb Bush in the election and expect people, oh, you supported Jeb Bush, I supported Jeb Bush. That's not the way that I make my selections. I think Jim Renacci would be a decent candidate. I've heard him on the radio before, but no, I don't think that the race is really clear yet. What I do know is that the Democrats, like I said earlier in the broadcast, while we were doing some of these, we were talking some of the topics with the Democratic Party. I think that the Republican will win in 2018 in Ohio for governor, mostly because there is the Democratic Party. You have to understand, if you're not from this state, has fallen into the shitter. They have completely and this is not a new thing. All the things that you are observing right now with the DNC and the Democratic base, and progressives fighting with moderate liberals. That's been the case in Ohio for a few years. The Democratic Party in Ohio is really I mean, it's. I wouldn't say it's sad because they suck anyway, and they have bad ideas, but realistically, you do need an opposition party. Really, I mean, it's. Hold on. I wouldn't say it's sad because they suck anyway, and they have bad ideas, but realistically, you do need an opposition. Can you mute your screen?
What?
I think you need to mute your screen, Alex. Anyway, 1 second. And they have bad ideas, but realistically, you need an opposition. Can you mute your screen? What? I think you need to mute your screen, Alex. Anyway, 1 second. And they have bad ideas. Realistically, you need an opposition. Can you mute your screen?
Is it better now?
Yeah, I was getting feedback from you.
I got you. I think I got that fixed.
Okay. Sorry for the insulting title of the video. So let me introduce it. Do you want me to just say your full name, or?
Yeah, I'm Alexander, and I'm from Tennessee, and I'm more of a moderate neoconservative type of guy.
Right, and you know, this is really coming to the fore at a conspicuous time. Donald Trump's been president since January, and since I've been I remember when I was a kid. Usually by this time, the parties had pretty much lined up according to who the president is, and I think that the senior Republican leadership has not lined up behind Donald Trump, as opposed to what's happened under President Bush with the Republicans, or under Obama with the Democrats, or under Clinton with the Democrats. And let me explain how this happened again for people that joined late. I saw that our friend here had posted a photo of John Kasich as on your office wall, was it?
Yeah, look, check it out.
Yeah, let them show it to you. And you know, and there's a couple other guys there that are that Will Hurd guy is an interesting guy, by the way, who I'd never commented on. I've always kind of, because he's I think he knows Urdu. He's like a Pakistan. He'd served in the CIA in Pakistan.
Yes, he did.
So I didn't comment on those guys because John Kasich was kind of my focus. But you know, we were going to have a debate. We'll see if this really turns into a debate, or we're just going to discuss this. Yeah, I've kind of become curious why people would still think that John Kasich is a great candidate. So I mean, let's hear why you're drawn to him.
Well, I read his book this past summer. I don't know if you know where I've come from, for one. I started out, I was a Democratic Socialist a year ago, and I'm a business major now. And that taught me a lot about economics and how liberal anti-business policies were really a terrible idea. And I was just like, I read this book right here. It's called When Helping Hurts. And it talks about how like giving money is just giving it away, teaches people to be dependent. And the same thing goes with government. When the government hands out money to people, they don't, like, they learn dependency from the government, not self-reliant. That's a terrible ordeal. And I started watching PragerU, and just over time I became more and more and more conservative, specifically economically. And also, I was always a social conservative. That's because of my faith. Even when I supported Bernie, I was always pro-life and pro-traditional marriage and whatnot.
So you're Greek Orthodox?
I go to a Baptist church, but I'm non-denominational.
Okay. So that's an interesting take. I think you know, fundamentally, I think that there's plenty of things that are shared. I mean, I'm more on the libertarian side of the spectrum. I was a Rand Paul supporter and a Ron Paul supporter going even further back.
I like them both.
Yeah, and I think that one of the problems that has happened is that the main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they kind of corral people into supporting candidates that are electable, so to speak. That's what happened in 2012 with Mitt Romney. That was the first year that I voted, and I actually regret voting that year
Really?
because, yeah, and I mean, I I have this attitude where I think that you have to have as much transparency and direct democracy as possible in politics, where we delegate so much of our, or not delegate, I mean, we render so much power to authorities nowadays, especially since the Patriot Act was signed when I was still in high school. Um, that I think it's time for people to talk about getting some of those liberties back, and that's one of the problems I have with the Republican Party, and why I don't want to. I don't want to be a Republican, because to me, by giving yourself these labels and affiliations, you're basically committing to people that have no obligation to reciprocate. So how about you? What's your idea of how you self-define? Do you have a political affiliation, or are you kind of more of an independent?
I'm moderate, but I'm Republican. I'm moderately conservative. What you said about the Patriot Act, I agree with you, and I agree with Ron Paul, and I agree with Rand Paul, though. I mean, that's a violation of the Constitution, and specifically the Fourth Amendment, to an extent.
Yeah, and I think we're dealing with the repercussions, and that's why I can't get behind a person like John Kasich, which I think we're going to get to. I don't want to take up all the time and like smother your points, but John Kasich, in my opinion, if you joined in time, is the type of Republican that I've heard described by a number of people as I would call them a Pomodoro Republican. There's a guy named David Brooks. He writes for the New York Times, and he's a so-called conservative, and he'll give an opinion, and he'll say, we need to lower the federal corporate tax rate by like 0.5% or whatever. And for him, that's what he defines as conservative. It's almost like tweaking a knob on your amplifier if you're playing guitar or something. Like you just adjust the level, and that's it. And it doesn't encompass a broad vision, like probably set out in the Prager videos, or the book that you said you read, When Helping Hurts, was it?
Yes.
Um, and I think that one of the reasons that I gravitated towards the Paul, Dr. Paul, was that you do need a longer game, and what they were proposing, for example, was massive defense cuts. Just a more equal foreign policy, where our allies like the Philippines, we will sell them weapons and we'll cooperate with them, but we don't commit massive forces to their defense. I mean, we kind of conserve our fiscal health and help them as much as we can without just being overcommitted. And that's just foreign policy. And then on the domestic front, all of these entitlements and obligations, like I was making a point earlier with healthcare, I think that their approach towards ending some of those programs is, in the long run, it's going to happen. So, I mean, let's hear your response to any of those points.
Well, first of all, my favorite thing about Rand Paul is that he is obsessed with balancing the budget. That's something we need more than anything right now in our country. $20 trillion of debt is just frightening, because it's our generation that's going to have to deal with that. And I mean, it's immoral to leave the future generations with that much debt. I mean, I'm from Greece. I'm watching my country go bankrupt right now, and these entitlement policies and socialism would do that to us. So then I move on to John Kasich. John Kasich has balanced budgets throughout his entire career in politics. You can go back to the 1990s where he worked with Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, and they compromised and they brought everybody together, and they ended up balancing the budget for the first time ever. Well, not ever, but in a long time in the early 90s. And now he has done the same as governor of Ohio, even though he's expanded Medicaid, which isn't a bad thing. Many Republican governors have expanded Medicaid. Doug Ducey has done it in Arizona, and Bobby Jindal did it in Louisiana. Sam Brownback did it in Kansas. It's not a bad thing to expand Medicaid, especially if the money is already there and coming from the federal government. My governor here in Tennessee tried to do it. His name is Bill Haslam, and it was the state legislator that blocked him from doing it because they didn't want any kind of affiliation with Obamacare. And I'm saying if Obamacare is going to help lower income people get coverage and your state doesn't even have to pay for it for the first 2 years, why not give it a 2 year trial run and see what happens? Because then that money just sits on the table if you don't. That's my thing.
Well, okay, so I'm glad that you outlined your position on it, and you gave like a you actually organized it well as opposed to some people that I've heard. But I'd have to say that based on your description, it illustrates exactly the problem that I'm talking about, which is this. And hear me out. Medicaid is a federal program, and as a whole, as a country, we are getting taxed for it. So it's an easy game, and it's a smart game. If you're Doug Ducey's the Arizona governor, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure if it was him or Jan Brewer who expanded it. Jan Brewer was the previous Republican from 2010 to 2014. So.
Right. So whichever guy we're talking about, whether it's Kasich here or what's that guy's name in Michigan?
Snyder. Yeah, he did it too.
Snyder.
I forgot about that.
So those guys, it's an easy fix for them, and let me explain why. As a state, it's almost like the federal government helps you do the work for you, but you kind of get to take credit for them screwing the individual citizen, and as so basically we're paying into a federal government that's in massive debt already to get into even deeper debt by expanding Medicaid, which I'll explain a different problem with that in a second. And then the states get to take credit for balancing their Medicaid budget. So yes, Kasich gets an allotment of funds for that program per year, and he can make a strategy for balancing it, which is fine. And it's been done for years, and which is part of the problem because yes, he can balance that, and he can let's say load more people into it. That's fine in terms of the game, but ultimately those costs are still being passed on to the federal taxpayer, which is the same person, right? It's just instead of saying that the state is taking more taxes from you, it looks like the federal government is taking it from you. So it's kind of like you're getting conned by both your state and federal government, because remember, President Obama was running on the position that yes, I'll tax you. I think I have to tax you because otherwise I can't do these programs that I think are important. And the Republican governors were like, we don't believe in raising state taxes, so we're just not going to do it. So they both found a compromise that was convenient for both at the expense of the taxpayers, and that's one of the ways that I think the two-party system has completely failed us. And then there's a different problem, and I'll let you.
I'm not a fan of the two-party system, but it's what we got to live with, I think.
Well, yeah, we do have to live with it, and it's. I don't think it's going to change in the near future. I had hopes in the past, but
change the nominees. For example, you're a libertarian. Austin Peterson is running for state senate for Senate in Missouri. Make sure every Republican and libertarian goes out and makes him the front runner to defeat a liberal like Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, I think Peterson. Yeah, he's running as a Republican because and I think
libertarian.
I think he'd be a good a good candidate for it
I'd vote for him.
in Missouri. But anybody would be I mean, Claire McCaskill, even for a Democrat, is incompetent.
She's crazy. She's very liberal.
Yeah, she's also like I mean, progressives hate her too because she has very little depth to her positions. So getting back to the Medicaid, the other issue is that, and I actually read about it. Do you know who Dick Morris is? He's President Clinton's former advisor. He became a Republican after Clinton was out of office. So I read his book when he was advising Clinton in '96. He was the person who got President Clinton reelected. His strategy was this. He made it seem like this. Now, Medicaid intuitively is for what type of people? Low-income people, right?
Yes.
But Morris was trying to say you have to allow for lower middle class or middle class people to have access to Medicaid. Otherwise, if only poor people were to have it, Republicans would completely repeal it because the poor are not going to. Sorry, I have this other camera turning on for some reason, but he said that the thing is that if only poor people get a program, then the general population won't care. So the Democratic strategy, and it's a pretty smart strategy, think about it, is that we are going to have middle class people get entitlements like Medicaid and other ones, so that people as in general are dependent on it, and that they cannot be rolled back, and that their budgets will continue to inflate. And it was a winning strategy back then. I mean, they did do a few cuts back in the Clinton years, and Kasich was involved in this. So I do believe, that he's partially responsible. If you go back to that era, John Kasich. Let me just tell this person trying to join the chat. John Kasich was pretty much part of this whole system of one hand washing the other, which is I'm bipartisanship sounds great on paper, but it just does not make much sense when you're talking about giving a working policy. And it's a problem because the majority of people would not vote. The majority of elected officials are not going to vote for the Rand Paul healthcare plan because they don't have it in their interests. A lot of these people in both parties are taking health insurance lobbyist money, and that's why Bernie Sanders can't get his healthcare plan passed. It's the same reason. It's inconvenient for the health insurance industry, the large health insurance conglomerates. It's inconvenient for them to have either socialized medicine or full free market medicine.
Realistically speaking, when you talk about healthcare, though, there isn't going to be a healthcare plan that really benefits the people that much because of the lobbying that goes in. And I sound very Bernie Sanders-esque when I say that, but it's true. That's also one of the reasons I've always been against the Citizens United decision. I thought the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act was one of the greatest things we've ever done. And again, that was bipartisan. It was John McCain and Russ Feingold that did it together. But you got to get that type of money out of politics. I mean, if bribery is an impeachable offense by the Constitution, why is it lobbying, especially with those levels of money, on the same level?
Are you asking me, or are you?
That's a question everyone should think about. And I'm not saying don't give any money to politicians. No, but I have a $2,700 limit of what I can give to each candidate. And if I wanted to give more, well, it's a little more difficult than that. I'd have to go through a PAC personally. But if I'm a labor union or something, that can go to a super PAC, and then there is no limit to the contributions at that point. And this is how the healthcare lobby funnels money to politicians to make sure that their profits will stay up. And it's not a bad thing that they're profiting, but they have created huge barriers to entry through different regulations that prevent competition from arising. And competition in this field is our best friend. If you ask me what my ideal healthcare plan would be, I'd have I'd free up the marketplace as much as I possibly could to let the free market take its course, to let, let's see, Blue Cross Blue Shield have commercials with Aaron Rodgers in them asking people for their business. At the same time, I would not cut this Medicaid expansion. Entitlements are very delicate, and sometimes you do have to cut them. But if you can, once you give an entitlement and you end up cutting it, that will always cost you votes. And politicians don't want to do that. And I think it would be wrong to cut Medicaid from people who are making under $16,000 a year. I think it would be okay to cut a lot of the services you would get through Medicaid expansion. But like if there's a dire service, I think it's okay to subsidize them. I mean, that's a good cause, and it's a good compromise because it should make people from both parties happy. The radicals will never be happy unless they have their radical way, but you can get about 80% of the people happy. That's my goal.
Yeah, I think you know, you make a couple points that I think are good there about the cutting the entitlements. No, you can't just cut entitlements like right away. Even if even if you want to, I would want to, but it doesn't work. I mean, dismantling the welfare state is not practical in one shot. That's what was done in Soviet Russia, and it was a disastrous process of the 90s, and the economy was in flux for much of that era. So Austin Peterson, ironically, who you mentioned, he had a plan of how to do that, and I think it's somewhat similar to some of the policies of this Mick Mulvaney guy, who's Donald Trump's budget office chief,
Yeah,
who I think he's one of the smarter people
I like Mulvaney a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, and I mean, I know that you're a little leery of Donald Trump. I mean, I don't like Donald Trump's treasury pick, but I think this Mulvaney guy was a good idea. But your statement on the campaign fundraising, um, yeah, that's like a real issue where the Supreme Court, um, you know, they made a ruling that was really based on the strict letter of the law. But I don't think that it has to be necessarily the way that um, Citizens United made it. What could be, for example, there's countries where, and the Bernie Sanders plan is, it's not like no country does it that way. It's probably one of the few ideas that I think he had that were, you know, at least somewhat, you know,
Do you
sane.
mean single payer healthcare?
The single payer healthcare is a sore subject with me, but I know I'm
Well,
not.
no, it's feasible. You can do single payer healthcare, but at the cost of 80% income taxes. Is that what you want? I'd rather keep my own money. That's the question you have to ask.
Well,
It does
not just the
Sweden and
80%
Denmark.
income. You would have to end virtually all immigration. By the way,
Exactly. Like
yeah.
it comes at great cost. It's not free. That's what Bernie doesn't understand. If people are willing to pay those costs, then vote for that type of change. But I'm not. I would like to keep the money I earn, and I will help people with my own personal money get their health insurance. I think you need to draw the line somewhere and cap it there, and that's what I did with Medicaid expansion.
So yeah, his campaign spending ideas, I think there is plenty of room to compromise there. The issue of the super PACs and all that, yeah, that's the system we've been left with. And this argument that free speech that money equals free speech is I think it's going to have to change someday. You can't have these lobbyist groups and I'm talking about all lobbyist groups. There's even lobbyist groups that agree with my positions. I think they just have too much of a foot in the door, and
Yeah.
and oftentimes they actually betray the actual cause that they're trying to that they claim to advocate for. I mean, you could talk about the AARP, for example. Um, it's a real issue with that. So back to John Kasich. So here's another reason that I think he would not be a success. In the current media climate, and by current I mean it's been like this for a long time, and I've been observing it. You cannot have a civil candidate win as a Republican. You would need somebody who's almost, and even Ted Cruz, who I think is kind of a snake. I don't think he could defeat Hillary Clinton. You need somebody. Sorry.
He would not have.
Yeah, it's really an issue it's kind of like this this body language thing. If you remember those debates, Donald Trump was this intimidating presence, and I think people appreciated it, rightly or wrongly, compared to both the Republican candidates and to Hillary Clinton. And people appreciated this as a person who's going to push his agenda and not allow people to dictate terms to him. Whether or not it's borne out that way is a matter of debate. I mean, obviously, for example, today there was the Afghanistan announcement. I understand that he reversed some of his opinions on that. But no, I don't think that John Kasich would have defeated Hillary Clinton, and I don't think he would.
Really?
Yeah, I think if you really look at his record in Ohio, he's been very lucky, which I could rehash. I was talking about before you came on, but could you explain what your hopes would be for John Kasich, both given your past, your past observations of him and what's going on right now?
Can I explain to you why I think he would have won first?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I actually think Kasich would have won by about the same margin Trump ended up doing. But Trump was extremely lucky. He lost the popular vote by 3 million votes, and he came about 100,000 votes short of losing this election across 3 different states in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. But about that, let's look at the swing states. Kasich would have easily won Ohio. He was a popular governor there. He would have won by about the same margin Trump did. Trump rode a populist wave and got a lot of blue-collar voters, but Kasich would have gotten a lot more white-collar voters from Cincinnati to make up, and Columbus and Cleveland to make up that margin. I do not think he would have carried Michigan. Michiganers hate Ohioans just generally, and I think he would have made it a very close race within like 2 or 3 points. But I don't think he would have carried Michigan or Wisconsin, really. But, well, no, he might have carried Wisconsin. That's hard to say because Ron Johnson won the Senate seat there, and he was pretty conservative, too. It wasn't like a wave of populism. But Kasich would have won in Nevada easily. Trump came very close to winning there, and the reason he lost was he polarized a few groups of Latinos down in the Clark County area. That's a growing demographic over there. Kasich would have won them over. And he also would, the margins in Arizona and Texas would have been a lot bigger for Kasich because white-collar, college-educated voters who voted for Hillary for the first time in their lives when they voted for a Democrat, they would have ended up backing Kasich. They like the idea of smaller government in a globalized world. But I think, I also do think Kasich would have won Pennsylvania. Pat Toomey managed to do it. And they're very similar people with a similar ideology. So I think Kasich would have won a few more states that Trump did, such as Nevada or New Hampshire. But and maybe even Virginia. Maybe Tim Kaine was from there, so that's hard to say. But I do not think he would have won Michigan and Wisconsin. Anyway, this was my hope with Kasich as president, with President Kasich. This still is my hope. I hope he comes back in 2020 and runs. But I think our country is extremely divided. We have a media that they make money off of dividing people. That's literally what they do. They get better ratings that way. That's how they make their money. They will divide us at every single turn. John Kasich would have gone against that. He would have united us. He has always been a man of compromise. He's always been a man looking to the other side and saying, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to follow a conservative ideology. but I'm going to have a few Democrats singing in the choir. That's what he told Chuck Todd the other day. And not because he agrees with democratic ideals, but because he wants to work together. He would have come up with a new health care bill, and it would have ended up passing. About 5 to 10 Democrats would have probably voted for it, and about 48 Republicans probably. That health care plan would have ended up passing and replacing Obamacare and truly doing something to address costs, which is a problem. He would end up doing tax reform. The corporate tax rate would go low. Both parties agree with that. They don't agree on the exact number, but they agree that it needs to be lower. And he also would have ended up securing the border. I think Trump will have done a little bit better job securing the border than Kasich would have. But I think Kasich would have done a good job, and he wouldn't have done crazy things like the travel ban or whatnot. I think in the end, though, it all comes back to saying that Kasich would have united our country, which is already super divided. And when he ran again in 2024, or 2020, if he had won this last time, he would have won in a landslide. I mean, Republicans would have gotten over 400 electoral votes because he would have brought people from all across the spectrum together for the good of a country, much like Bill Clinton did when he ran again in 1996. I hate the Clintons. I would have never voted for Bill Clinton, but he had plenty of conservative voters supporting him. And I think Kasich would get most of the conservatives supporting him and several moderate Democrats, and it would really be good for the country. That is my honest theory. To also address your point about the media, I want to close with this. The media, you literally witness them doing what they're doing. They're dividing us up, and Hillary Clinton's campaign made sure they propped up Donald Trump as much as possible to make sure he got the nomination because he was the easiest candidate for her to beat, and she could not beat him. So what? Will Kasich end up? Will is Kasich going to end up there? And he would end up. He would have easily beat Hillary. He would have won the popular vote. He would have won those few states, and the media would have eventually taken him seriously. They would not have waged all-out war against him like they have against Trump, because he wouldn't go out and insult them. And as much as I don't like CNN, when President Trump calls them fake news, that doesn't make the media treat him any more fairly. So I'll leave it at that.
We've been left with, and this this argument that free speech that money equals free speech is I think it's going to have to change someday. You can't have these lobbyist groups and I'm talking about all lobbyist groups. See, there's even lobbyist groups that agree with my positions. I think they just have too much of a foot in the door, and oftentimes they actually betray the actual cause that they're trying to that they claim to advocate for. I mean, you could talk about